Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University. School of Education, SOE. Master of Arts in Adult Education, MAE. Second year. MAE 004 Extension Education and Development. Block 1 Introduction to Extension Education and Development. Unit 1 Extension Education, Concept, Principles, Philosophy and Approaches. 1.0 Introduction I. Extension is a term which is open to a wide variety of interpretations. It is a dynamic concept subject to multiple interpretations and thus has been changing. It is a relatively new operational concept in India. It became diversified due to its increasing relevance and contribution to different sectors of development. Extension education as an applied science derives its contents from research, field experiences and behavioral science, among others. It employs diverse means, techniques, technologies and approaches to deliver its contents. It has its philosophy and principles that focus on addressing the problems of people in rural, remote and disadvantaged or backward areas. Extension is an important means for inducing people to help themselves in using their own and local resources to the maximum and government aid to the minimum for their development. Extension stimulates desirable developments within the framework of the national, economic and social policies involving different sectors of development. In this unit i.e. the first unit of the first block of this course MAE 004, the focus of our discussion will be on the concept, scope, philosophy, principles and approaches of extension education. Objectives. After going through the unit, we expect you to be able to explain the concept and scope of extension, discuss the philosophy of extension education, describe the principles of extension education, establish the relationship between extension and development, and analyze the approaches to extension education. 1.2 Concept, process and scope of extension. In this section we will discuss the concept, objectives, and process of extension, which together will enable us to have an understanding of the scope of extension. 1st February 2001 Concept of extension, origin, expansion and diversification. The term, extension, has its origin in the Latin word, tensio, meaning stretching, and ex, meaning out. The literal meaning of extension is stretching out. Extension basically extends education. Its purpose is to change the attitudes and practices of people with whom the work is done. The common use of the term, university extension, was first recorded in the 1840s in Britain. The first practical steps were taken in 1867–68 when James Stewart, Fellow of Trinity College, Cambridge, gave lectures to women's associations and working men's clubs in the north of England. James Stewart is often considered the father of university extension. In 187 Stewart approached the authorities in Cambridge University to organize centers for extension lectures under the university's supervision. Cambridge formally adopted the system in 1873 and was followed by London University in 1876 and Oxford University in 1878. By the 1880s the work was being referred to as the extension movement. In this movement, the university extended its work in the areas beyond its campus. The growth and success of extension work in Britain influenced the initiation of Similar activity elsewhere, especially in the United States, in many states. Comparable out-of-college lectures became established practices by the 1890s. Later, the extramural work of the land-grant colleges, concerned with serving the needs of farm families, expanded dramatically and became formally organized. But the use of the term, extension, continued and has persisted as the designation for this work. All these activities indicate that the target group for university teaching should not be restricted to students on campus, but should be extended to people living elsewhere. Extension was thus seen as a form of adult education, in which the teachers are staff members of the university. However, for many years, this was mainly an activity of the College of Agriculture, which employed county extension agents all over the state. Later, extension agents started serving other subsectors of development in addition to agriculture and allied activities. In India, the university extension gained momentum with the establishment of the state agricultural universities, SOEs, on the pattern of land-grant colleges. In the US, the first SOE was established in Pantanga in 1960, and by 2010 there were 45 SOEs in the country. These universities have the statewide responsibility for extension education and have integrated teaching, research, and extension at all levels, individual, department, college and university. The University Grants Commission of India, in its landmark policy framework of 1977, has recognized extension as the third dimension, equivalent to teaching and research. With this policy, extension has emerged as third major function of universities in general, and of agricultural universities in particular. This policy framework also led to the establishment of departments or centers of adult and continuing education and extension in general universities. On similar lines, IGNOU has also started the Center for Extension Education, and recently the School of Extension and Development Studies. Extension tilde education. Concept, principles, philosophy and approaches. Nevertheless, the concept of extension was expressed in varied terms in different countries as presented below. Global perspective of extension terminology. Extension was first used to describe adult education programs in England in the second half of the 19th century. These programs helped to expand or extend the work of universities beyond the campuses, into the neighboring community. The term was later adopted in the United States of America, while in Britain it was replaced with the term advisory service in the 20th century. A number of other terms are also used in different parts of the world to describe or denote extension work. The Dutch use the word voorlichting, which means lighting the pathway ahead, to help people find their way. The term penyuluhan in Indonesia and perkembangan in Malaysia are used, which also mean lighting the way ahead with a torch. Germans talk of advisory work or berating, which implies that an expert can give advice on the best way to reach your goal, but leaves the way. Kaunal awai local terminology meaning Arabic Alershad guidance. Dutch voorlichting lighting the path. German berating Aufklärung advisory work enlightenment. Erziehung education. French vulgarization simplification. Spanish capacitation improving skills. Thai, Lao song, Suem to promote. Persian Thawej and Gostarage to promote and to extend. Indonesia penyuluhan lighting the way ahead with a torch. Malaysia perkembangan lighting the way ahead with a torch. USA cooperative extension teach people to solve problems themselves. Austria fordering stimulating. For your selection, the Germans use the word Aufklärung, enlightenment, in health extension to highlight the importance of learning the values underlying education and development good health and to stress the point that we must know clearly where we are going. Germans also speak of Erziehung, education, as in the USA, where it is stressed that the goal of extension is to teach people to solve problems themselves. The Austrians speak of Förderung, furthering, or stimulating you to go in a desirable direction. The French use vulgarization, which stresses the need to simplify the message for common man, while the Spanish use capacitation, which indicates the intention to improve the people's skills, although normally it is used to mean training. The terminology related to the concept of extension thus presents the panoramic picture of the diversity with which the term extension is viewed, understood and used in different parts of the world. Notwithstanding the above, the individual experts in the field have also conceived and defined the term extension differently, keeping in view its developmental objectives, reach, delivery, funding, etc. Some selected definitions given below provide us comprehensive understanding of how the meaning of extension has changed over time. 1949. The central task of extension is to help rural families help themselves by applying science, whether physical or social, to the daily routines of farming, homemaking and family and community living. Berner and Xin-Pao Yang, 1949. 1961. Extension education is an applied science consisting of content derived from research, accumulated field experiences and relevant principles drawn from the behavioral science and synthesized with useful technology into a body of philosophy, principles, content and methods focused on the problems of out-of-school education for adults and youth. J.P. Liggins, 1961. 1965. Extension has been described as a system of out-of-school education for rural people. Saville, 1965. 1966. Extension personnel have the task of bringing scientific knowledge to farm families in the farms and homes. The object of the task is to improve the efficiency of agriculture. Bradfield, 1966. 1973. Extension is a service or system which assists farm people, through education on procedures, in improving farming methods and techniques, increasing production efficiency and income, bettering the levels of their living and lifting social and educational standards. Monder, 1973. 1974. Extension involves the conscious use of communication and information to help people form sound opinions and make good decisions. Van den Ban, 1974. 1982. Extension is to help people identify and analyze their production problems and become aware of the opportunities for improvement. Adams, 1982. 1988. Extension is a professional communication intervention deployed by an institution to induce change in voluntary behaviors with a presumed public or collective utility. Rowling, 1988. 1997. Extension is the organized exchange of information and the purposive transfer of skills. Nagel, 1997. 1999. The essence of agricultural extension is to facilitate interplay and nurture synergies within total information system involving agricultural research, agricultural education and a vast complex of information providing. Businesses, New Chattel Group, 1999. 2004. Extension is a series of embedded communicative interventions that are meant, among others, to develop and/or induce innovations which supposedly help to resolve, usually multi-actor, problematic situations. Lewis and Van den Ban, 2004. From the above definitions we can understand that extension, I, is an intervention. A communication intervention, 2, is an educational process, 3, intends to induce voluntary change in behalf or 4, focuses on a number of target groups, follows different processes, and produces different outcomes, has an altruistic orientation, and 6, has a technological, research and professional dimension. Extension is, thus, an educational intervention aimed at bringing a desirable change in knowledge, skills, attitudes and practices behavior of people so as to involve them actively in the process of development. How, then, is extension education different from formal education? Table 1.1 makes the difference between formal education and extension education them very clear. Formal education and extension education starts with theory and works up to practice, starts with practices and may take up theory later on. Students study subjects, people study problems. Fixed curriculum offered, no fixed curriculum or course of study and people help to formulate the curriculum. Authority rests with the teacher, authority rests with the people. Attendance is compulsory, participation is voluntary. Teacher instructs the students, extension worker teaches and also learns from the people. Teaching is only through instructors, teaching is also through local leaders. Teaching is mainly vertical, teaching is mainly horizontal. More or less homogeneous audience, heterogeneous audience. Rigid, flexible. As already made clear, extension is a dynamic concept in the sense that the interpretation of it is always changing. Therefore, extension cannot be defined precisely and in universally acceptable manner, but it can be described as a continual and changing concept and process. Nevertheless, we can rather sum up the concept of extension in the following statements. Extension is an informal educational process directed towards the rural education and development population. This process offers advice and information to help them solve their problems. It aims at increasing the efficiency of the family farm and increasing production in particular and increasing the standard of living of the farm family in general. In other words, it involves helping farmers to improve the productivity of their agriculture and also developing their abilities to direct their own future development. The objective of extension is to change farmers' outlook towards their difficulties. Extension is concerned not just with physical and economic achievements but even with the development of the rural people themselves. Extension is a process of working with rural people in order to improve their livelihoods. Extension agents, therefore, discuss matters with the rural people, help them to gain a clearer insight into their problems and also enable them to decide how to overcome the problems. 1st February 2002 Objectives, Components and Process of Extension. In this subsection we will present you the objectives, components and process of extension. 1.2.2.1 Objectives of Extension. The fundamental objective of extension is to stimulate desirable development. Following are the 5 specific objectives of extension. To transfer knowledge from researchers to the end users. To advise people in the decision-making process. To educate people to enable them to take similar decisions in future on their own. To enable people to have clear goals with knowledge about their possibilities and how to realize them. To stimulate desirable developments within the framework of the national, economic and social policies involving all the subsectors of development as a whole. 1.2.2.2 Components of extension. Based on our understanding of the concept and objectives of extension, we can identify 4 main elements which form part of the process of extension, viz. I. Knowledge and skills. 2. Technical advice and information. 3. Motivation, involvement and self-confidence. 4. Farmers and people's organization. 4. Practice. These 4 elements can be reduced to the following 3 broad components or activities of extension. A. Extension education. Extension services. Extension work. I. Extension education. It is basically a need-oriented, local resource-based, problem solution-oriented system interrelated with education and research. The extension efforts are related to research in terms of new technology processes and products. The extension education role is generally performed by higher learning institutions, viz. research institutes, universities and apex-level training and extension organizations. 2. Extension service. Extension service is the mission and mandate of development. Extension service is a program for development implemented by way of adopting the extension process. Extension service is location-specific, input-intensive, service-oriented, and field-level professional activity with 2 objectives of A. Transferring new technologies or innovations and advising the people on improved methods, and B. Communicating development constraints to research institutes, development organizations, policy makers as feedback for participatory technology development. Thus, extension service serves as a link between researchers, development workers and people. Extension service also works hand in hand with other development departments and input agencies to multiply their efforts and effects. 3. Extension work. Extension work is to assist people through both education and service. Through extension work, people are stimulated to adopt changes that result in more efficient production and marketing, conservation of natural resources, improved livelihood security, health, and more satisfying family and community life. Extension work is at the lowest in hierarchy, but extremely broad-based in usage. It is also extremely location-specific and usually susceptible to outside criticism. Extension work is to help people to help themselves. The process of extension subsumes the above components and elements of extension. 1st February 2002. 3. Process of extension. The process of extension, as applied to development programs, involves 5 essential phases or steps. Figure 1.1 shows the sequence of steps that result in progress from a given situation to a new or a more desirable one. I. Analyzing the situation. This requires a large amount of facts about all aspects of the situation where extension work is to be taken up. Information is needed about the people's interests, needs, education, social customs, farming systems, water bodies, etc. These details can be obtained by conducting participatory rural appraisal, rapid rural appraisal. This information helps in formulating a suitable developmental program to overcome the identified problems. 2. Setting the objectives or goals to be accomplished. The beneficiaries of development programs must be involved in setting and selecting a limited number of objectives which should state clearly the expected behavioral changes in people as well as the economic or social outcomes desired. 3. Teaching. It is the process of arranging situations in which the things to be learned are brought to the notice of the people, their interest is developed, and a desire for change is aroused, i.e., they are stimulated for action for their development. 4. Evaluating the teaching. Evaluation is to determine the extent to which the objectives have been reached. Plans for evaluation should be built into the plans of work during earlier phases. A distinction should be made between records of accomplishments and original objectives stated. Reconsidering. This step consists of a review of previous efforts and results, which reveal a new situation. If this new situation shows the need for further work, then the whole process may begin again, of course, with new or modified objectives. These steps are necessary in carrying out planned extension educational efforts. These steps are not necessarily separate from each other. Past experiences show that planning, teaching, and evaluation can also take place continuously but in varying degrees throughout all phases of the extension process, depending upon the systemic and institutional context. B. Extension education learning system. We can elaborate the above process by presenting it in the form of extension education learning system. Extension education learning system is a dynamic, non-formal system for developing and implementing programs. The system consists of numerous complementary and interactive components, each contributing to the success of the total system. The individual components are the organization's mission, situation analysis, target audiences, needs assessment, program objectives, content, learning strategies, and LAT non-formal learning system, which includes inputs, evaluation and adjustment. Key supporting components of inputs include experience, renewalment, and integration. Other components vital to the total system include collaboration with learner groups and learner motivation. Organization's mission. An organization's mission defines reason for its existence and forms the foundation for its operations and functions.
A mission statement sets forth an organization's purpose and helps clarify and define the organization's goals and program thrusts. As an organization evolves, its mission is subject to change. These changes may be influenced by social, economic, political, or other factors, and may be gradual or rapid depending upon the conditions influencing the need for change. The mission continuously clarifies and defines the programs of an organization. Situation analysis. Analysis of the situation is a deliberate process that accurately assesses situations and circumstances influencing the lives of people in a defined geographical area. This process is important for obtaining a perspective for identifying the needs of individuals and communities. The situation analysis may be focused on one community or broad-based to encompass a region as a whole. Situation analysis includes the study of an area's demographics, its economic infrastructure, the availability of public services, its topographical features, number and characteristics of its communities, the attitudes or motivations of specific groups within the area, resources available, etc. The information must be continually updated to reflect the dynamics of human and societal change, and to incorporate new information along with an understanding of its significance. Collaboration with learner groups, continuous and effective collaboration with groups and representative members of the groups is vital to the success of any educational program. Collaboration can be greatly enhanced by effective use of the Extension Advisory Leadership System. Collaboration is the only way for an educator to ensure that groups are appropriately targeted and their needs are addressed with highest priority. Effective collaboration motivates people to participate more willingly and to support efforts in which they feel personal ownership. Therefore, collaboration and consultation strengthens program development, implementation and participation. Target groups. When the situation is analyzed, specific groups can be identified for enlisting their participation. Groups have a wide array of attributes that influence their receptivity to educational programs. Knowledge of different segments of the population can be useful in structuring program delivery systems that respond to the preferences and needs of those specific groups. By clearly targeting groups, needs can be more accurately assessed, and program content can be identified or developed, and appropriate delivery systems can be structured to provide the information. Factors that may be considered in segmenting groups include known personal characteristics and preferences of a population segment, 2. Their known sociological and cultural characteristics, 3. Their receptiveness to educational opportunities, and 4. How their informational needs are currently being met. Many other factors like the location of the groups, their available resources, their economic opportunities as well as their needs or circumstances fitting into the extension's overall mission, vision and strategic plan may be considered. Needs assessment. It is a highly focused process that analyzes the specific groups who have been targeted by particular organization for emphasis in educational programming. The needs assessment focuses on determining the specific needs of the targeted groups. It seeks to identify current circumstances or conditions faced by the targeted groups. This gap between what is and what should be possible is considered the need. In addition to direct interviews and a random survey of members of the target group, the needs assessment will include observations by the extension professionals as well as by other collaborating individuals or groups. Program objectives. Once information has been obtained about the educational needs of the targeted groups, objectives can be developed with focus on meeting those needs. These objectives should focus on the changes desired in the targeted group based on the identified needs. The educational objective, S, should include information that will answer the four questions: how, who, when, and what. A brief statement that answers these four questions should form a usable objective that will guide an educational program. The objective specifies the means for providing needed information. How, to a specific learner group, who, and answers the question of when, by. describing the time constraints under which the program will be conducted. The objective should also include what the learner is expected to know or achieve at the end of the planned educational program. The what are expected results. Objectives should be measurable and should be stated as behavioral changes expected in the targeted group of learners. Content. The content provides the information needed by the learner by means of an educational program, depending on the identified needs of the targeted groups and their assessed level of knowledge. The content of the educational program may be basic or highly complex. The content may focus essentially on any subject, depending upon the program objectives and the target group. Learning strategies. These are the major strategies for conducting the educational program. This stage of the extension learning system sets the time limitations and the overall sequence in which the information will be provided for achieving the program objectives. The beginning and ending points are specified as well as each intermediate step in providing educational inputs. Through this means, program needs such as time and resource allocations are defined. The overall learning strategies provide the framework for selecting the appropriate program delivery methods and for establishing the sequence in which the methods will be used in implementing the planned program. Extension education. This occupies a very enviable status in the hierarchy of technological changes and their application, because its personnel have a background of both the technology and behavioral sciences in addition to sound information of extension education itself. 1st February 2003. Scope of extension. The scope of extension encompasses a range of developmental efforts that enable the deprived and the needy people in rural and remote areas to have high standards of development or to achieve better living standards and quality of life. Extension deals with different aspects, problems, and issues concerning development of people, including implementation of relevant programs. It teaches, trains, guides, counsels and facilitate people to work out ways and means of satisfying or fulfilling their felt needs. It enables people to recognize and help themselves to solve problems of their development. It is an effective means of education for action in groups and masses within a democratic framework of society. It emphasizes on change of mindset and outlook of the people and tries to instill ambition in them for higher standards of development. It inculcates in them the desire to acquire the required skills, will and determination to work towards such standards and goals. Extension education. Concept, principles, philosophy and approaches. The scope of extension is this very vast and diverse. It has lot of relevance for development as its process can be flexibly applied as extension education learning system within the institutional setups. Extension and development. Development is not a matter of only plans, targets, budgets, technology, experts and organizations to govern them. Rather, it is an effective use of all these mechanisms as educational means for changing the mindsets and actions of people in such ways that they help themselves even to attain development. Extension education, as we have discussed above, has emerged from the acceptance of this idea and shows the ways to help people achieve their set goals. The ultimate goal of extension is to develop the people by improving their standard of living through education and voluntary Participation in extension programs. In this context, it is imperative to understand varied dimensions of development and their relation to extension. Development includes, among others, development of people and satisfaction of their basic needs: food, shelter, clothing, access to safe drinking water, sanitation, public transport, health and educational facilities, etc. Underdevelopment means denial of basic needs to people while enhancing the material returns to the dominant groups. Development will necessarily involve the use of socio-cultural, financial, political and human resources facilitated by extension. The relationship between extension and socio-cultural, economic, and human development is illustrated in Figure 1.2. The two columns represent economic and political development. The girdle represents socio-cultural development, which is dependent upon the support of the two columns, economic and political developments, which in turn rest upon a foundation of human development. Extension is the connecting link, process, between people and development outcome. Different dimensions of development are discussed in brief below. Human, personal, development. Development in any meaningful sense must begin with and within the individuals. Unless motivation comes from within, efforts to promote change by extension workers will not be sustainable by the individual. The individual will remain under the power of others. Human development is the process by which an individual develops self-respect and becomes more self-confident, self-reliant, cooperative and tolerant of others. Through becoming aware of his shortcomings as well as potential for positive change that fosters development. Economic development. This is a process by which people, through their own efforts and or efforts of the extension agents, boost production for direct consumption and have surplus to sell for cash. Political development. If development is to benefit the people, then the political structure must be responsive to their needs and aspirations and protect their rights and property. People have to acquire political power in order to participate in decision making and choose their own leaders, plan and share power democratically, create and allocate resources equitably and efficiently among all groups. Feedback from extension workers on various issues and concerns of development is important to influence policymakers. Social and cultural development. It refers to those investments and services carried out or provided by extension agents for the benefit of the people and communities, whether in a village, a district or a country as a whole. These services include health, education, water, energy, transport, communication, etc. In short, the essence of extension process is helping people by means of education, training and service to make use of the developmental avenues to achieve their goals for higher and better quality of life. Therefore, you as an adult educator or an extension worker have to work with people, help them become self-reliant, and educate and train them to become central actors in the process of development. 1.3 Philosophy and Principles of Extension. Extension is a significant factor which works to produce change for development. Its philosophy is to cooperate with all those who aim to develop individuals, communities and the nation. Extension philosophy broadens the vision of the individuals to set realistic goals, to work towards opportunities and to realize the set goals. It also helps in formulating the principles for practice of extension. In this section we will therefore focus our discussion on the philosophy and the principles of extension. 1st March 2001 Philosophy of Extension. According to Mildred Horton, 1952, the principles of philosophy of extension include the following. P. The individual is supreme in a democracy. The home is the fundamental unit in a civilization. The family is the first training group of the human race. The foundation of any permanent civilization must rest on the partnership of man and land, nature. According to Ensminger, 1961, extension philosophy should lay emphasis on the following. Changing attitudes, knowledge and skills of the people. P. Working with men and women, young people, boys and girls to address their needs and wants. K. Helping people to help themselves. Learning by doing, and seeing is believing. Development of individuals, their leaders, their whole society, and their world as a P. Working in harmony with the culture of the people. P. A two-way channel of communication. A continuous educational process. In brief, this is the broad philosophy of extension as expounded by the individuals. State's philosophy of extension. The philosophy of the state regarding extension can be extension, looked at from different, is an economic necessity. Perspectives. The as governments follows have realized that without a stable, productive and contented rural population all other factors towards economic development may fail. No country can afford to neglect its rural population. Every country needs an ample and dependable supply of staple foods for the whole nation. In a country where the farmers are discontented or not very efficient, the supply of staple foods cannot meet the demands of the whole nation. A modern farmer can also grow industrial crops which produce valuable raw materials for many and diverse industries, which help provide employment for swelling population and increase the national wealth. Further, if there are considerable inequalities of income between the urban and the rural people, many of the young population will tend to leave the rural areas and migrate to the cities. But the cities may not always be able to absorb them, the frequent result being overcrowding slums, unemployment, vagrancy, and social unrest. These are some important reasons why governments have begun to take interest in the masses, and extension programs have been created all over the world. Extension serves the economic objectives of the nation. It is no longer a good practice for a villager to carry on what he learned from his father or family. Farming must be progressive and efficient, just like any other industry, or else the whole nation is likely to suffer. So, the first requirement for people's progress is new information. The purpose of extension is to bring this information to all those who need it. 2. Extension is based upon research. The main focus of extension is on people and the things that cause people to act as they do or how to influence them to change. At least two things are necessary to bring about change, namely sources of new information, and 2. Spread of the information to the masses. Information does not just come out, it must be searched for and thought out. That is why there is a need for research institutions to get information. Researchers, on the other hand, will not know what kind of information to get unless they are told what to research. The people in general have little opportunity to compare their practices with those of others, and often they are not even aware that there is room for their improvement. Therefore, the first job that extension workers have to do is to help the people define their own problems. Once their problems have been clarified, the extension worker can present them to the researchers, who in turn try to look for possible solutions. Very often they know the answers for many problems from previous experience, and there is no need for research on such things. But again, the extension worker has to bring effective solutions to the villagers. He has to translate abstract formula into clear, understandable language, and show them how, when and where the new knowledge may be profitably applied. Research discovers and develops technology. It is the source of new information. Extension imparts the knowledge of technology to be used. It spreads the necessary information, now or at any future time, from its source to the ultimate users, the villager and the members of his family, and encourages them to use the information. 3. Extension bases its programs on needs. All people desire higher goals in life. Once people are convinced of the value of new methods and that the new methods will help them reach their goals, they will change to attain this desired goal. Therefore, the major task of extension is to convince the people of the value of new and better practices. Extension paves the way for further progress by making the community aware of the benefits to be obtained from the programs. 4. Extension is an educational process. Extension involves no coercion of any sort but is an educational process, different from formal education. Extension depends on the ability of a limited number of workers to inspire clientele and to create a desire in them for more efficient production and better living conditions in the rural areas. The clientele must be encouraged education and development to meet in groups to secure the information and assistance they desire. If the extension worker would devote more efforts to create a desire for information, the clientele would come and ask for it, rather than wait for it to be brought to them. The motivation of the clientele thus becomes a phase of extension work, worthy of careful study. Extension is concerned not only with learning but also with the application of the knowledge gained from everyday living. It is an extremely practical and concrete type of education that may be put to use at once. Timeliness must always be borne in mind in the planning of extension programs. In order to change the behavior of people, extension must first gear their attitude towards change. It may question traditional practices and motivate them to change to improve their own living conditions. To bring about a change in attitude is a basic educational function of extension. It has been suggested that extension is not solely concerned with teaching and securing the acceptance of a particular improved practice, but with changing the outlook of the clientele and encouraging them to take the initiative to improve their lives. The effectiveness of extension is measured by its ability to advance from the static situation which generally prevails in rural areas. As we know, change can be brought about by choice through education, and 2. By force or coercion. Choice may be represented by education. It is a means to supply the people with knowledge, experience and the learner how. Force may be represented by supplies and services in the form of physical one. Material inputs. The idea of giving education choice instead of physical things is commonly expressed as helping people to help themselves. Education is the primary object of the extension work. Others may stress physical inputs, force, and make people dependent on them. Both education and supply services, regardless of how they are organized, are necessary for highly effective extension work to get a big change, but the degree of emphasis may vary. Extension education should promote improved practices and make them viable by encouraging action through cooperation with others. This is all, in brief, about the state's philosophy of extension. 1.3 Two principles of extension. Extension activities are widespread throughout the developing world. Different countries have set up formally structured extension services to implement their programs and projects. The practice of extension is supported by budget, offices, personnel, and other resources. Extension work is based on some working principles and processes. According to the MAAE and Bhatnagar, 2009, the knowledge of the principles of extension is necessary for an extension and development professional. These principles are as follows. I. Principle of interest and need. Extension work must be based on the needs and interests of the people. These needs and interests vary from individual to individual, from village to village, from block to block, and from state to state. Therefore, extension programs have to be formulated based on the needs of the target groups. 2. Principle of cultural difference. Extension work is based on the cultural background of the people with whom the work is done. The extension worker has to know the level of knowledge and skills of the people, the methods and tools used by them, their customs, traditions, beliefs, values, etc. before starting the extension program. 3. Principle of participation. Extension helps people to help themselves. Good. Extension work is directed towards assisting people to work out their own problems, rather than giving them ready-made solutions. Actual participation and the experience of involvement create self-confidence in the people and they learn more by doing. 4. Principle of adaptability. People, groups and their conditions differ from place to place. Therefore, extension programs should be flexible so that necessary changes can be made whenever needed to meet varying conditions. The grassroots principle of organization. Any development program should fit in with the local conditions. The aim of organizing a local group is to demonstrate the value of the new practices or programs so that there is more people's participation. 6. The leadership principle. Extension work is based on the full utilization of local leadership. The selection and training of local leaders to involve them in extension work is essential for the success of the development program. People have more faith in local leaders and they should be used to put across a new developmental idea so that it is accepted with the least resistance. 7. The whole family principle. Extension work will have a better chance of success if the extension workers have a whole family approach instead of piecemeal approach, separate approach. Extension work is therefore for the whole family. 8. Principle of cooperation. Extension is a cooperative venture. It is a joint democratic enterprise in which people cooperate with their village, block, and state officials to pursue a common development cause. 9. Principle of satisfaction. A satisfied customer is the best advertisement. The end product of the effort of extension education is the satisfaction that comes to the people and their family members as the result of solving a problem, meeting a need, acquiring a new skill or some other changes in behavior. Satisfaction is the key to success in extension work. Smiley the evaluation principle. Extension is based upon the scientific methods of development and it needs constant evaluation. The effectiveness of the work is measured in terms of the changes brought about in the knowledge, skills, attitude and adoption behavior of its people, but not merely in terms of achievement of physical targets. 11. Principle of democratic approach. XTILDE in education is based upon the democratic principle of discussions and suggestions. Participation of people in extension activities is voluntary and development interventions are carried star out based on the perceived needs of the people. 1.4 Approaches to extension education. Having studied the concept, philosophy and principles of extension, we will now focus our discussion on the approaches to extension education. There is no one particular approach that suits to all situations. In other words, approach varies depending upon the situation. Following are the important approaches to extension education. 1st April 2001 Systems Approach. The prominent features of a system include the organizational structure, the choice of clientele, the operational design and the methods used. These are directly influenced by the goals of an organization, and hence, must be evaluated in terms of their contribution to goal achievement. The goals of extension may vary within the overall system as well as between different extension organizations. The objectives and the approaches adopted for achieving them must fit into the organizational framework. In this context, Axon's principal observation is of particular importance. The success of an agricultural extension program tends to be directly related to the extent to which its approach fits the program goals for which it was established. Axon, 1988. The alternatives to organizing extension demand choices in many respects such as the following: public versus private, government versus non-government, top-down, bureaucratic, versus bottom-up, participatory, profit versus non-profit, free versus cost recovery, general versus sector, multi-purpose versus single-purpose, technology-driven versus need-oriented. Table 1.2. Look at the screen. 1st April 2002 General Clientele Approaches. The general clientele approaches are again of different types such as the following. Ministry-based general extension. In the early days of independence, many African and Asian governments organized agricultural extension work under the wings of their ministries of agriculture. All options for reaching large number of clients and serving their needs in terms of quality information and assistance were open. The original colonial model combined research and extension within the same organization. All important aspects of smallholder agriculture, plant production, animal husbandry, home economics could be attended to as the ministry established respective sections under its jurisdiction. The fact that the ministerial hierarchy followed the country's territorial subdivision allowed the systematic expansion of the system down to the village. The generalist nature of field extension staff functions corresponded to the set of problems faced by non-commercial growers. 2. Cater to specific needs, in terms of technology or in terms of target groups. Specialists could be employed. Thus, clientele included in principle all persons engaged in agriculture, commercial service and support. Organizations lacking village-level extension staff could be expected to supplement information by rendering services necessary to apply it productively. A uniform and nationwide organizational pattern seemed to facilitate information flow, including the infusion of expatriate expertise and corrective measures whenever weaknesses were identified. Public interest was to guide goal setting, program formulation, and the implementation of field work. One disadvantage of the general extension approach is that it is usually and fairly centralized and government controlled. It assumes that the technology and knowledge appropriate to local people do exist, but the same are not being used by them. On the other hand, success is measured in the adoption rate of recommendations and increase in national production. Training and exit approach to extension, T&V is not a separate approach but one way to organize ministry-based extension. T&V was originally meant to solve some very specific problems of conventional extension services. T&V concentrates on contact farmers expected to pass information on to fellow farmers with similar problems. Fixed visits at regular intervals are prescribed to ensure regular field contacts, facilitate supervision and communication, and set clear and attainable objectives. Similarly, regular sessions for extension workers to receive training and discuss administrative matters are held. Thus, costly refresher courses are avoided, knowledge is enhanced step by step, and up-to-date information is fed into the system. In addition, T&V operates under the assumption that its extension workers are exclusively engaged in educational activities and that a unified extension service exists. Agricultural research must not only be effective but also work in close collaboration with extension. Both external and internal evaluations are to be used to constantly modify and adapt the system to the changing conditions. The training and visit approach is this fairly centralized and is based on a rigorously planned schedule of visits to farmers, training of agents and subject matter specialists. Close links are maintained between research and extension. Agents are only involved in technology transfer. Success is related to increases in the production of particular crops or commodities. 2. The integrated project approach. Integrated approaches aim at influencing the entire rural development process. Extension is the strategy which targets the entire population in a given area and emphasizes work with rural and disadvantaged groups. Integrated approaches are generally implemented in the form of large-scale and foreign-funded projects aiming at alleviating mass poverty in rural areas on the basis of a simultaneous improvement in the utilization of natural resources and of human potential. Raj, 1993. Measures to promote production are coupled with a strong emphasis on self-help. The underlying concept is multi-sectoral. Recent efforts to improve regional rural development, RRD, projects and enhance key chances for a broad and sustainable impact are relevant for all general extension approaches, IBID. The key concept is the availability of locally adapted solutions established on a common basis. This requires participatory technology and an active and collaborative role between the change agency and different institutions involved. An emphasis is laid on dealing with adverse framework conditions, explicitly taking them into account and attempting to influence them in favor of the clients. Finally, in order to achieve these improvements, new efforts are made to specify and operationalize extension objectives and concepts, sustainability, participation, gender-specific target group approach, and poverty alleviation. This approach concentrates efforts on a particular location for a specific time period, often with outside resources. Part of its purpose is often to demonstrate techniques and methods that could be extended and sustained after the project period. Change in the short term is often a measure of success. 3. University-based extension. While the Cooperative Extension Service (CES) of the United States is still the only system in which the main extension function remains within the university, some developing countries, notably India, have integrated educational institutions into practical extension work. Within the United States of America, state universities have traditionally cooperated with local counties and the U.S. Department of Agriculture in doing extension besides education and research. Within the last 130 years, extension goals of the land-grant colleges have shifted from practical education to technology transfer and, more recently, to a much broader concept of human resource development. With the emergence of strong private and other public sector research and development organizations and dramatic changes within the agricultural production sector, CES is facing new challenges with regard to coordination and cooperation. Apart from its traditional roles, networking will become a primary role. Bennett, 1990. In this model, industry as well as intermediate and end users of knowledge become part of the extension system. While in most countries, the main contribution of educational institutions to extension will be the training of qualified, dedicated and responsible personnel, some Indian agricultural universities have come close to the U.S. model without taking over the full load of extension work in the field. They have taken over functions which are only inadequately performed by the ministry, thus supporting general extension work. Remarkable features are direct assessment of clients' needs, user-oriented research, quality training for state personnel, and a strong linkage between academic education and field practice. Models vary from state to state. This approach is also used by other educational institutions which have technical knowledge and some research ability to provide extension services. For rural people, planning and implementation are often controlled by the hosts, who determine school curricula. The emphasis is often on the transfer of technical knowledge. 4. Animation rural approach. For a historically short period, the concept of animation rural (AR) gained importance in Francophone African countries such as Senegal, Ivory Coast, and Madagascar, Deville, 1967, and Georges, 1967. Animation rural was an answer to the authoritarian and often repressive nature of intervention before independence. Developed originally by the French Institut de Recherches et d'Application des Méthodes de Développement, Iran, It shows many parallels to the Brazilian experiments of Paulo Freire. Integration of rural areas into the national system was to be achieved by initiating a dialogue between rural communities, collectivities, and the state. In a dialectical way, increasing competence of villagers to express their own needs was to liberate them from colonial dependence. In order to initiate and perpetuate this process, AL relied on a large number of voluntary collaborators, called animators, selected by the villagers themselves. These animators had to be experienced and well-respected farmers but not traditional leaders. Training, supervision, and support of animators were organized by the Ministry of Rural Development. Their task was to initiate discussions within the community on local needs and objectives, thus empowering rural people for dialogue with the state. At the same time, they were to interpret government plans to the villagers and acquaint them with services available. The long-term perspective was a replacement of traditional institutions and creation of development cells to negotiate contracts with the state bureaucracy. 1.4 3 Selected clientele approaches. The selected clientele approaches to extension are flexible depending upon the specific one selected clientele or the nature of extension suited to them. Commodity-based extension. Commodity-based extension run by government or private firms is the most commonly followed approach to extension organization. Clients may be dispersed over a large area or closely connected, as in the case of large, centrally operated irrigation projects. Commodity-based extension is the predominant feature in many francophone countries of FICO, shoes, 1973, but is also strong in other countries with commercial or export crops. The original rationale for this approach was the generation of revenue as well as the assured supply of tropical products for the colonial powers. All aspects of producing and marketing a particular CRCP are vertically integrated, spanning the whole range from research, advice and material support given to farmers, to organizing marketing and even exports. Proponents of the approach argue that, by infusing modern technologies and monetary incentives into traditional farming, a cumulative chain of effects is triggered, thus contributing to overall development. Advantage of this approach is that the objectives and the targets can be clearly defined and the organizational structure kept simple. The focus on only one or two crops and facilitating training of extension workers who are agents of the society were broad concerns. Control of agents and farmers is easy because they are judged in terms of defined targets. The key characteristic of this approach is to group all the functions for increased production, extension, research, input supply, marketing and prices under one administration. Extension is fairly centralized and is oriented towards one commodity or crop, and the agent has many functions. 2. Extension as a commercial service. Commercial extension is a recent phenomenon and modern side of the traditional agriculture. It may be part of either the sales strategy of input supply firms or a specialized consultancy service demanded by an agricultural producer. In both the cases, the goal of the organization or the individual is profit earning, which in turn is tied very closely to customer satisfaction. Most directly, this is the case for private consultants who will be retired only if their clients feel that expenses made have been profitable. Large input supply firms or rural banks that use their own extension workers as sales personnel must also have a long-term perspective with regard to the competitiveness of their products and services. Negative effects of incorrect application or use will be attributed to the product itself. The clients of commercial extension will also be profit-oriented. Their objective is the optimal utilization of purchased inputs or contracted expertise. The emergence of commercial extension has influenced the debate on who should bear the costs of extension. With escalating budget deficits, the idea of extension as a free public service is no longer being generally accepted. It is argued that those who can afford it should actually pay for advisory services. In the case of commercial input suppliers, the solution is very simple. The costs of extension are included in the product price, as are the costs for research or advertisement. Private consultancy, on the other hand, is costly and affordable only to either large-scale or highly specialized producers. As a general trend, public extension in industrialized countries has been under pressure to introduce cost sharing or altogether commercialize advisory work. Privatization and cost sharing are propagated in the name of greater effectiveness and efficiency, but are largely influenced by financial constraints. It is obvious that the private sector will be active only in case of reasonable returns, and they will not be concerned with public interest issues. Because of the selective participation of the private sector, the provision of public good types of information will have to remain a public sector responsibility. Public and non-profit organizations will have to work together to satisfy the needs of those in orphan areas. Umli and Schwartz, 1994. This approach assumes that cost sharing with local people, who do not have the means to pay the full cost, will promote a program that is more likely to meet local situations and where extension agents are more accountable to local interests. Its purpose is to provide advice and information to facilitate farmers' self-improvement. Success is often measured by the willingness to 3. Client-based and client-controlled extension. One way of dealing with the shortcomings of large extension systems has been to localize extension and utilize the self-help potential of rural groups. Often organized by outsiders, these decentralized approaches are in a better position to serve the needs of specific target groups, notably those in disadvantaged positions. Close contact with their clients and intimate knowledge of their life situations are essential for planning of the problem-oriented extension activities. Local personalities are identified who take over leader functions once the external non-governmental organization withdraws. The principles of these organizations, awareness, empowerment, participation, self-help, are close to the philosophy of animation rural without their national dimension.
The impact of client based approaches is that they provide benefits to their clients directly. The diversity and large number of small projects forbid a general statement on their effectiveness in terms of human resource development. It appears, however, that their weakness lies more in the technical field, UNDP, 1991. Besides, they can reach only a very limited number of people. Apart from this, they perform an important role as organizational innovators. They have proved that participation can work in Practice and that many farmers are highly competent partners in technology development. Government extension services have been forced to rethink their top-down approach to accept human resource development as an equally important extension goal and to address the problems of rural women. This approach often focuses on the expressed needs of farmers groups and its goal is increased production and an improved quality of rural life. Implementation is often decentralized and flexible. Success is measured by the number of farmers actively participating and the sustainability of local extension organizations. 1.5 Practice of Extension Education in India, a brief overview. In this section, we present you a brief overview of the practice of extension, including its institutionalization in India. 1.5.1 The Indian Extension System, Phases and Programs. Extension system in India cuts into various sectors. In the Indian context, there are four major organizational streams or systems devoted to extension work for development of various subsectors. These streams are 1. First line extension system. This comprises mainly of union and state ministries, research councils and their research institutes functioning under various ministries, national and state institutes for development of different sectors and central and state universities. Second or middle level extension system. It comprises mainly of state department development. 3. Third level of extension system. It comprises mainly village-level extension workers under State Department. 4. Development extension work by non-government organizations, voluntary organizations, business and corporate houses. A broad overview of the extension organization established under these four streams or systems is given in the following table. Table 1.3 Streams of extension system and organizations thereunder. First line extension system, Union and State Ministries of Agriculture, Rural Development, Health and Family Welfare. Indian Council of Agricultural Research, ICAR, Indian Council of Medical Research, ICMR, Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR. Indian Council for Social Science Research, ICSSR, Indian Council for Forestry Research, ICFR. National Institute of Rural Development, NIRD. National Institute for Health and Family Welfare. NIHFW, National Institute for Agricultural Extension. Management, Manage, Central Research Institute. For Dryland Agriculture, CRIDA, National Remote Sensing Agency, NRSA, National Plant Protection Training Institute, NPPTI, National Research Center. For soybean, NRCS. Central Universities, State Agricultural Universities. State Health Universities, General Universities. Second or middle level extension system, State Departments of Agriculture, Animal Husbandry, Environment, Panchayat Raj and Rural Development. Revenue, Health and Family Welfare, Education, Energy. State Institutes for Rural Development, SIRD. Third level extension system, village level extension workers for various line departments. NGOs and voluntary organizations, Council for Advancement of People's Action and Rural Technology, CAPAT. The list of institutions mentioned above is not exhaustive, and there are many more involved in extension education. Since independence, the Government of India has been establishing various organizations over the years as part of many extension programs launched under different streams mentioned above. Different extension programs for development launched in India can be classified under the following four distinct stages: community development, technological development, Development with social justice. Infrastructure development. Some important extension programs with commonly used abbreviation and year of their initiation are presented in the table below. Table 1.4 Important extension programs of India. Look at the screen. We have provided you the glimpse of various programs of extension launched in India along with variety of institutions involved in implementation. We will discuss more details about the extension programs in Unit 2 titled Development of Extension Education in India. 1.6 Summary. In this unit, we have focused on the concept, components, objectives and scope of extension education. We looked at the changing meaning and interpretation of extension over a period of time and in different parts of the globe. We have touched upon the interrelationship between extension and development and the outcome of the extension process. We have discussed the philosophy, the key principles and process of extension. We have also discussed different approaches to extension. We have presented a brief structure of the Indian extension system, along with various agencies involved in it. We hope and believe you got clarity about all the aspects discussed in this unit, which means your journey through the units that follow will be smooth and progressively easier to understand them. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next video with the next chapter.